Just one of you can tell me, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. So now I'm moving to the other important discussions, right? All this I have already told you earlier. Mark that the reason and inspiration for my writing are those people who are exploited and used and yet do not accept defeat. That is, you have to, at the same time, remember two things. On one hand, she took the exploitation as her subject, exploitation of the tribal and especially the tribal women as a main focus. And at the same time, she did not simply project the defeat and the suppression or the oppression or the exploitation of these people. At the same time, she also showed by a number of her writings, a number of her characters, how these women, in fact, revolted, protested in a very significant manner against all the injustices and inequalities against them. Okay. Now, I already told you about the that imaginary maps, and I told you it is not, though it is by and large restricted to some particular states in our India, but then by the very main imaginary maps, we can always expand the geographical domain beyond Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or Bihar or Purulia in West Bengal and move beyond India to anywhere where you have the subalterns, where you have the oppressed people living in one sense or the other. Right. Now, I already told you about the main central character, that is Mary Aurong in The Hunt. And we already know, some of you started reading the story, you must be knowing the storyline, how she was actually given birth to by an Australian. In fact, she was a Basque sense. And she was, on one hand, in her, she had, in fact, the white blood as well as the blood of Bikini, the tribal woman. Right. Now I move to the analysis of important aspects. In fact, India's indigenous tribes are located in the lowest strata in the strictly demarcated caste society. According to Mahasweta Devi, the struggles of decolonization are fundamentally cultural, and there exists a tension between the myths and rituals of the indigenous tribes and the pervasive modernity of national bureaucracy and multinational capitalism that penetrates even the most remote regions of the Indian subcontinent. Try to understand what this particular quotation really means. Actually, Mahasweta Devi is trying to draw our attention to this harsh reality that though we achieved independence, there was not much of a change that happened in the life of the tribal people. Earlier, the whites used to exploit them, and now only the people changed, but the extent and the nature of exploitation still remain the same, more or less. So colonization, in fact, hardly mattered. See, to try to understand, and everybody, where it is the rich men, the rich people, the bureaucrats, the government officials, the middlemen, everybody tried to have his own pound of flesh. The tribal women, both in pre and post-colonial independence, post-independence period, have been given insufficient recognition. Recognition we are talking about. What recognition? They were not considered really human beings in the right sense of the term. The traditional image of Indian womanhood, whether the socially secure and independent image of the Aryan woman or the sheltered and protected image of the parda-clad medieval woman, does not include the grim realities that constitute the life of tribal women. So the tribal women were in fact a class in themselves, always to be oppressed, always to be exploited, sexually, that is physically, mentally, economically, even culturally. The subordination of the tribal women operates at various levels, the first among which lies in the very terms of discourses which are decidedly mainstream. The traditional notions associated with women's role, their social position and responsibilities, their privileges, economic, political, and sexual, are determined and judged from the dominant cultural perspectives which are opposed to the ideals of tribal traditions. This is something very important. See, so the tribal ethos were totally ignored. Nobody really cared for the kind of environment, the kind of nature, the kind of culture, the myths that come along with all these tribals. The tribal women's independence, for instance, is misread so very often as frivolity, as something very trivial, petty, or even immoral, something immoral, unethical. The irony is that I myself am exploiting others and taking advantage of their poverty and their disadvantaged condition. And I'm talking about immorality. Her resourceful handling of nature is seen as witchcraft. Often, we come across the very concept of witches, and some women, poor women, are burnt even today. And her fearlessness is translated as a criminal bent of mind. Look at this. So this is a very important aspect here. This particular point, this is something very, very important for all of you to understand. This is, right? Uh, so all these features of the tribal women, whether it is the independence or, they have a tendency to roam about in nature, given the kind of light, given the kind of grooming that they have, right? And her resourceful handling of nature is seen as witchcraft. So try to understand what I am saying here. See, and her fearlessness is translated as a criminal bent of mind. Obliged to face the double jeopardy of being women and also tribal. I have purposely made it red. Try to understand their predicament. On one hand, they are the tribals, and the tribals are the disadvantaged people in more than one senses. And now they are women. So Mahasweta Devi, in fact, in her writings, in her stories, is talking more about the women, the tribal women. So you have to understand that the tribal women are doubly handicapped. First, as a tribal, and second, as a woman. The tribal women have to contend with images, one of which presents them as bright and comely, but hopelessly immoral. So if you are good looking, well, your good looks obviously are supposed to make you more at the receiving end of somebody's lust. Okay, so that is their predicament that you have to understand. Now, Mahasweta Devi provides representation to the subaltern women within the socio-political domain of the nation, where the impact of materialism and greed intrudes into the mental and physical geography of the margins, that is the poor and exploited tribal women. Try to understand. It is not simply a physical exploitation. It is not simply raping them. It is also a kind of mental complete exploitation. It is also mental. Try to understand this. So they were exploited mentally also, economically, physically, mentally, psychologically. In her acceptance speech as Raman Magsaysay Award, Mahasweta Devi says, "My India still lives behind the curtain of darkness, a curtain that separates the mainstream society from the poor and the deprived. But then why my India alone? As the country comes to an end, as the century comes to an end, it is important that we all make an attempt to tear the curtain of darkness." Obviously, thereby she means that let us become aware the reality. Let us understand that now we are free, that now just we have not to only consider about the growth of materialism, but also, first of all, the growth of human beings, the proper freedom, and uh, the minimum kind of respect that is demanded as a man. See the reality that lies beyond and see our true faces in the process. Women's writing has emerged and evolved as a result of socio-cultural conflicts that originated in 19th century India. The women emancipation is a matter of much upheaval, both globally and locally. And in India, the reawakening of women is an outcome of the efforts of reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. They declared women morally superior to men and took recourse to the Vedic era. You know, during the Vedic era, which is also called the golden age of Hinduism, well, women were believed to be possessors of Shakti on one hand. Shakti represents the energy and the power, right? And deified as Durga sometimes. Durga is not just the protector, Durga is also the killer of the demon. Kali, the destroyer, Lakshmi, the nourisher, and Saraswati, the creator. So four different incarnations, and all these four qualities go together to make a woman, right? The protector, the destroyer of all the evil, the protector of the innocence, nourisher of all the environment, the family, the neighborhood, the society, and creator of resources, creator of learning and awakening, enlightenment, all that. So this was the concept of a woman, and gradually with the growth in materialism, gradually women lost their position. The depiction of tribal women's predicament serves as a corollary to the status of women in India. So it is not simply the loss of respect, the loss of elevated position of the tribal woman. Is actually, it goes hand in hand with the status of other women also in India as well as all over the world. The study becomes imperative due to the fact that women are the pillars of mankind, comprising almost half the population of human race. And the different facets of their socio-economic life play a landmark role in their destiny. Now, I'm quoting one interesting uh, observation in Manusmriti, chapter 4, sloka 27 and 28, where it is written that man cannot make any progress if there be no woman standing by his side, ready to cooperate with him in all his activities. That means man, that Purush, the male, is absolutely unable to do much progress of his own. Man's power lies dormant so long as he is not touched by the spark of women's love and affection. The wheel of the world cannot move in the absence of women. That is what is written in Manusmriti. Despite women being the bedrock of society, they are subjected to repression, marginalization, and exploitation at the hands of men for centuries together. Mahasweta Devi examines the deep-rooted prejudices of race, class, gender, and envisages to bring the spirit of egalitarianism, that is equality, a sort of equality among human beings, so as to achieve a holistic development of tribals. Right? So what is she doing is, she is on one hand drawing our attention to the poor conditions of the tribal people, and at the same time trying to assert the ignominious condition of the women, and also making the tribal women take arms, take cudgels against all their oppression, and making a point that, well, if needed, they can even outsmart the so-called very smart male counterpart. As a subaltern class, women demystify the idealized notions of womanhood and proclaim themselves as makers of their own destiny. Those who have read The Hunt, you know what actually Mary did at the end of the story. I'm not going to tell you right that now. So nobody could protect her, perhaps, had she not protected herself, not even that lover, Jalim. The Hunt focuses on representation of tribals in general and tribal women in particular as abject beings, exploited, tortured, humiliated, manipulated, and raped by the rich institutions and, ironically, even the protectors of law. Here, Mahasweta Devi clearly makes a shift in the general perspective about subaltern women by presenting them as decisive and assertive women. So they are not supposed to be just lying passively and suffering. No. So they are presented here, especially the central protagonist in The Hunt, as well as that day I mentioned to you another story, Draupadi. There also you would find the central protagonist is taking arms and asserting herself, and therefore, so they don't accept by lying low and passively, right? And they adhere to the ideology of violence, death, and destruction. So they don't really accept lying low, their suppression and their oppression. Rather than adhering to the feelings of helplessness and misery due to their victimization, they bounce back with greater vigor against the perpetrators of violence. Her short stories are eye-openers as they present tribal women's non-conformity to stereotyped roles, patriarchal boundaries, and internal colonialism. Try to understand that what Mahasweta Devi is doing is not just writing a story. Her stories become, in fact, a kind of a spark to all other people who suffer in one way or the other, and at the same time, trying to awaken us, the privileged class, and telling us, are we really properly educated? The women characters in Devi's works are stronger when compared to men. Her stories are a study in brutality and degeneration wrought on women for centuries. She narrates horrific tales of women forcibly imprisoned in stereotypical assumptions of womanhood, perpetuated through patriarchal ideology, and also documents women's reprisals against subjugations, which become the means of potential emancipation. So if you really want to come out of this bondage, if you really want to uh, get liberated, perhaps a tribal woman, the best thing that a tribal woman can do is to take cudgels, to take arms in her own hands and strike at the very root of injustice. After undergoing consistent degradation at personal, socio-economic, and political levels through physical, emotional, and psychological rape, molestation, suppression, torture, her tribal woman transforms herself from a victim to a subject position. So from object, she reverses the role and assumes the role of the subject with the courage of her convictions and brings about metamorphosis, that is the transformation in her life. The Hunt maps the experiences of the Aurong tribals, particularly of a tribal woman, that is Mary Aurong, and tribal life in post-independent times. Now, before I proceed to discuss the text with you, I would like to ask you if you have understood what I talked to you so far. Anything to ask? Just a minute before I start again to continue my deliberations. Anything where you could not understand so far what I said? All of you, one of you should unmute and tell me whether you could understand everything that I narrated today. Yes, hurry up, don't waste time. Could you understand what I said in my presentation so far?
Yes, sir.
You have understood everything? There is no question? No doubt? Is everything clear to you? Yes? So, okay, then I proceed now with the text. So let us just start the text. Now, this is the text. So let us just now try to read the text and understand what actually Mahasweta Devi is trying to do in the hunt. And you know this is translated by Gayatri Spivak. The place is on the Gomo-Daltonganj line. That is somewhere near Jharkhand today, Jharkhand, Bihar, that area. Train stopped at the station once upon a time. The expense of having train stop was perhaps too much. So there is an irony you can understand, right? Now one sees a stray cow or a goat in the station room, in the residential quarters, and the porter's shanties. Shanties are actually the jupri kind of things, you know, very poor, poor people's hut, you see. The board says Kuruda outstation abandoned. Some of you must have seen while passing through certain railway stations, sometimes you suddenly find passing by, you just see somewhere it is written abandoned. That is now there is no stoppage of the train. And once upon a time, the train used to stop there. Now it is for one reason or the other. Now the train doesn't stop it. It has become commercially unviable. See, right here, the train slows. Why slows? Because it's a climb up. It gasps as it climbs, because actually it was a description when there was no electrical train. It was just a steam engine. It climbs Kuruda hill bit by bit right from here. It is a low hill. After a while, the train enters a ravine. On both sides of the half-mile ravine, there are blasted stones. Might be some coal mines. There's a bamboo thicket on the hill, and occasionally the bamboo bends in the wind and hits the train. Then the train descends and it gathers speed. So you understand how closely Mahasweta Devi has observed all the details. Now the station is Tori, the busiest station in this area. The junction of many bus routes. So here, Tori is a very important commercial place, and it's a kind of a junction from where you can get buses also to go to different places. Tori is also a coal halt. So trains have stopped there also to collect coal. Earlier we just read, so blasted stones means you have the coals there. So now Tori is the place from where the coals are picked up. The train picks up coal. There are surface collieries all around. In these parts, low-grade coal is to be found almost above ground. So it's very easily available. But Tori's real benefactors means people who get the benefit from here, are the timber brokers. Timber brokers, try to understand, brokers are agents. So timber, you know, is the wood, is the timber that you get, and out of the tree, the timber that you get, and you make furniture. It is a sal growing area. Sal logs arrive night and day by truck. So, well, might be legally, might be illegally, the sal trees are felled and the sal logs are cut and sent. They are split in timber yards and sent in every direction. Toris bustle is an experience after the silence of Kuruda. And in fact, this is a very interesting line at the end of the first paragraph, because this does not only tell us about the commercial opposition between Tori and Kuruda, right? Kuruda is a place where only the tribals live and there is hardly any commercial activity, right? So it is more a kind of an abandoned, that word is very significant. It is a place away from the public gaze, and nobody is really cared. Nobody is really concerned about Kuruda and what happens, who lives there, how they live, and etc. etc. On the other hand, Tori, being a junction, is full of activities and full of all profit and business and commotion and all that. It is an experience to watch. It is an experience to watch the train move on the hilltop from distant villages. The villagers see this day after, uh, the villagers see this every day, yet their amazement never ends. That's again another interesting thing. This tells us about the innocence of the poor people. They hardly have anything surprising in their life. So the train itself is a kind of a wonder. The train goes on, the engine gasps. Now the raven swallows the train. Suddenly, because of uh, the, the nature of the geography there, the raven, the hill, right? What happens suddenly when you are looking at the train, after a while the train is lost because it goes down and you cannot see it properly. So if you run, you can see where it will spit it out. There were some elephants There were some elephants seen one day at the top of the hill. The elephants stopped as they ate the bamboo. From a distance, they looked like toy elephants. Because of the distance, you see, they don't look like the normal big elephants. And why this description about the elephants? So you can understand that Mahasweta Devi is telling us about the natural kind of a bounty. You have Sal, you have elephants, you see. So these all tell us that left to themselves, perhaps Kuruda could sustain itself, the tribals could have sustained themselves. But because of the greed and materialistic tendencies of the merchants and the bureaucrats and all others, you see, who tried to get the benefit out of it, they were uh, they lost, in fact, a number of their natural resources. So from a distance they looked like toy elephants. After the train passed, they ran off, trumpeting, trunks raised. Okay, the village of Kuruda is a good way behind the station. uh, the village of Kuruda is a good way behind the station. There are two hills, one beyond the wide meadow. If it had been a bit closer, the villagers might have started living in the abandoned brick-built house. So this is just a description. And so we are just told that the story is about a place called Kuruda and some tribal people who lived there, away from all the comforts of the city and away from the public gaze, you can see, just in the lap of nature. For people who live in the villages like Kuruda, life holds few breaks other than annual fest days. Mark that. So in their life, it's a very routine and a mechanical kind of a life. There's hardly much of a change or variety apart from some annual feast days or festivals. Try to understand. In the life of the tribals also, they have uh, some kind of celebrations, some rituals, some festivals, some festivities. Apart from those days, there is hardly any variety, hardly uh, anything else in their life. So just this goes on and on and on with a kind of monotony of its own. So their eyes are charmed by the scenes on top of Kuruda Hill. So naturally, when they see the train passing or some elephants or something, this is a kind of a variety. When Mary Aurong now, so after 3 or 4 paragraphs, we are introduced to the central protagonist, Mary. When Mary Aurong comes up, she looks at the train as the passengers look at her if they see her. Interesting. This is an interesting thing. She looks at the train as the passengers look at her if they see her. Mark that. So she is looking at the train and the passengers are looking at her. So that means she is exceptional. In what way? Mark now. 18 years old. So she is raw in her youth. Tall, flat featured, very sharp, and quite tall as a woman. Light copper skin. Light copper skin. So that is also unusual for a tribal woman. A tribal woman is generally black. Usually she wears a print sari. So we understand because she is actually not perfectly a tribal woman. She is a bastard. She has the white blood as well as the blood of a tribal. So she combines in her features also, physical features also, both the father and the mother. Usually she wears a print sari. She looks at the train, so the passengers look at her if she catches their eye. At a distance, she looks most seductive. This is something interesting again, and I would ask you to underline this part. Mark that. At a distance, she looks most seductive. So you understand that I already told you that a woman is to a number of these people, she is an object, right? So she is most seductive, but up close you see, if you come closer, you will find that, well, you really cannot take her easy, take her for granted. Rather, she would present before you a strong message of rejection in a glance. Rejection in a glance means don't try to come closer. Don't try to take any kind of an advantage. Otherwise, you will be in some kind of a problem. You know, so she has that kind of a mental, moral guts and integrity. You wouldn't call her a tribal at first sight, yet she is a tribal. Once upon a time, whites had timber plantations in Kuruda. They left gradually after independence. Mary's mother looked after the Dixon's bungalow and household. Dixon's son came in 1959 and sold the house, the forest, everything else. He put Mary in Bikini's womb. And one of you, I think Ananya, you wrote that day in your comment that this is also a kind of a hunt. Yes, it's a hunt. The title of the story is Hunt, and it is actually the son of Diction hunting Bikini, sexual hunt. You see, he put Mary in Bikini's womb before he left. He went to Australia, right, Mark? So I don't take any responsibility. I just enjoy. The padri at the local church christened her Mary because the father was a Christian. Bikini was still a Christian, but when Prasadji from Ranchi came to live in the Diction bungalow, so when the property was sold and some man called Prasadji from Ranchi, he came to start living there. Well, he refused to employ Bikini. Why? Because she was a Christian. So she had to once again change her religion. Try to understand. This is again another kind of colonization. Like the British come here and they force you to speak English. Prasadji came there and he forced Bikini to change her religion. Mark that. So you have different kind of exploitation going on. Dixon's son exploited Bikini sexually, physically, and Prasadji exploited her religiously. Right. So you cannot have anything of your own. Mary pastures Prasad's cattle. She is a most capable cowherd. Mark that. The word is very important. Most capable. Is not just capable, most capable. So you understand the superlative degree. She also sells custard, apple, and guava from the Prasad's orchards, driving terrifically hard bargains with the Kunja. So she is loyal to the employer. In fact, she is not employed. She just lives there and she helps her mother, right? Mark the kind of devotion and the commitment that the tribal people offer, right? And we hardly value this quality. and she was a great bargainer. She used to do all this for Prasadji. Hard bargains with the kunjas, the wholesale fruit buyers. She takes the train to Tori with vegetables from the field. So she had all that stamina. Mark that she used to carry all these fruits and vegetables up to Tori to sell and get the best price for Prasadji.